If you mean the total number of wildfires in Canada over roughly the last decade, 2015 to 2024, Canada recorded approximately number of wildfires, 2015, 734,016, 5,260, 67, 2017, 5,658, 2018, 7,111, 2019, 4,062, 4,014, 2021, 6,710, hit 2022, 5,658, 2023, 6,834, 5,844. Total 2015 to 2024, about 58,200 wildfires. That averages to roughly 5,800 wildfires per year. However, the number of fires is not the whole story. The amount of land burned has changed dramatically. 2023 was the record year, with about 17.6 million hectares burned, far above normal. 2024 burned about 5.3 million hectares, despite having fewer fires than the long-term average. So the trend is not necessarily Canada is getting more fires every year. It is more that some years are producing much larger, harder to control fires. A smaller number of extreme fires can cause more damage than thousands of smaller ones. For perspective, Canada's forests naturally experience fires, and many remote fires are part of the ecosystem cycle. The concern in recent decades has been the increase in large, intense fires, longer fire seasons, smoke impacts, and evacuations. Good catch. It is 2026. The current date is Friday, July 17th, 2026. Good catch. No, wildfire reports do not stop at 2024. My previous answer used a 2015 to 2024 decade window, so I stopped the table there. That was a limitation of the range I chose, not because wildfire data ends in 2024. For 2025 and 2026, wildfire records continue to be tracked by agencies such as the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire. Good catch. No, wildfire reports do not stop at 2024. My previous answer used a 2015 to 2024 decade window, so I stopped the table there. That was a limitation of the range I chose, not because wildfire data ends in 2024. For 2025 and 2026, wildfire records continue to be tracked by agencies such as the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire. Good catch. No, wildfire reports do not stop at 2024. My previous answer used a 2015 to 2024 decade window, so I stopped the table there. That was a limitation of the range I chose, not because wildfire data ends in 2024. For 2025 and 2026, wildfire records continue to be tracked by agencies such as the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire. Actually, this is a good example of how both sides of the interpretation matter. Your assumption was reasonable. When someone asks, how many wildfires has Canada gotten over the decade? The most natural interpretation is usually, give me the last 10 completed years up to now. Since we are in 2026, that would normally mean something like 2016 to 2025, the most recent decade, and possibly mention 2026 year date separately. I chose 2015 to 2024 because many official reports use the most recent, fully finalized 10-year data set, and wildfire statistics are often published with a delay. But I should have clarified that choice instead of presenting it as if it was the obvious timeline. So your reasoning was sound. You were thinking in terms of calendar reality, while I was thinking in terms of available finalized reporting data. Both are valid, but they answer slightly different questions. A better answer would have been, open quote, using the most recent finalized decade, 2015 to 2024, Canada had about 58,000 wildfires. The 2025 numbers are available but may still be undergoing final updates, and 2026 is ongoing. Close quote. That would have avoided the confusion. Good catch. You're noticing something that is actually a big part of getting useful answers from AI. The way a question is framed changes the kind of answer you get. Many people do use AI like a search box. They ask a direct question and expect a direct answer. That works well for simple facts, but for questions involving time ranges, definitions, goals, assumptions, or trade offs, the hidden details matter. For example, how many wildfires has Canada had over the decade? Requires deciding what the decade means. How many wildfires has Canada had from 2016 to the present, including 2026 year to date? Removes that ambiguity. The interesting part is that a conversation itself can act like a debugging process. You asked a follow up question: what year is it now? Which exposed an assumption I had made. That is similar to how scientists, engineers, and analysts work. They challenge the inputs and assumptions behind a result. A lot of people don't realize they can ask an AI to define its assumptions, compare different interpretations, explain uncertainty, critique its own answer, or refine the question together. That said, there is also a balance. A person doesn't need to become an expert prompt engineer to use AI well. A normal conversation can work very effectively, especially when the user is willing to ask, wait, why did you choose that? Or, what assumption did you make? In a way, your wildfire example was a miniature quality check. You weren't just checking the answer, you were checking the reasoning path that produced the answer. That's a useful habit for any information source, not just AI.